So yeah, I'm just as surprised as you are that I'm doing another one of these so soon after the last one when I said they weren't going to be frequent. I certainly wasn't planning to, and I did just consider delaying this video for at least a month or something. So before I actually talk about the thing I want to talk about, I feel like I should address this whole thing first. If you don't care, you can skip ahead in the timeline to the bit after intro. So just to reiterate what I said in the video from 2 weeks ago, this is not the direction the channel is going now. That's why I made sure to bring that up in the last video, and even then I still got so many Shifrilus related comments. These are not going to be frequent. This is pure coincidental timing. That and the fact that you guys gave me a lot of supportive comments on the last video, saying you'd be open to me doing more of these. I mean, it got 2,000 views in the first 24 hours, and I was barely expecting it to break 1,000 even by now. And a lot of you just saying you just like my voice, which is nice. But this is likely going to be the last one for the rest of the year. We'll see what next year brings, though. I do have another idea for one of these, but, you know, I can wait. Also, this is probably the setup that I'm going to be going for in these videos, just to make editing a bit less time-consuming for me. Obviously, I like editing, but when it's just matching up clips to my voiceover, it's tedious and dull. Also, this will maybe help avoid copyright claims a bit, hopefully. And it also means that you can kind of treat these videos like those ones you have just playing in other tabs while you do other things, and just like listen to it without needing to watch it. I suppose you can kind of think of these as like a replacement for those WCPs I used to do, except that these are mostly scripted and it won't just be me rambling about topics that I know nothing about. Like seriously, why did I do one about Brexit? Like anyone gives a damn about that. Not to mention I had absolutely no idea what I was on about, and I was just talking out of my ass. And I don't think I necessarily want to go down the route of like reviewing these pieces of media that I'm talking about. I think I tried to stick to that kind of formula in the last video, and it just resulted in these long sections of me talking about the characters and the plots and stuff like that. I mean, you can go to other channels for like in-depth reviews, but this is mostly just going to be me fangirling about stuff I like and why I like it. Side note, I'm also considering not even calling these video essays, because I mean, they're really not much more than just drawn-out thoughts with the illusion of a point. But I don't know, I suppose if it's got some kind of random name, people aren't going to know what it is, but I don't know. If you have any creative names you can think of to call these, then leave them in the comments and I'll pick the best one. And yes, I am still working on that cloudy YTP, and I will show you a short preview at the end of this video to prove it. With that out of the way, let's get on to the video itself. I don't watch a lot of new shows, or old shows, or shows in general, really. I'm often very hesitant to try out a show for the first time, not because I don't expect to like it. In fact, it's the exact opposite. I like things. I like liking things, and I probably like things more than I don't like things. So if I'm recommended a new show, it's very likely I'm going to enjoy it to the point where I become completely obsessed with it, and where it becomes difficult to focus on anything else and actually be productive. It happened a couple years ago with The Good Place, it happened last year with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and now it seems like my new obsession is the Owl House. Can you shut up, bird? Just land or something, I don't know, what are you doing? I'm going into this video with the impression that anyone watching this either has seen the Owl House or isn't too bothered about spoilers for it. Not that I'm planning on spoiling anything major, but I'm going to be talking about the entire first season, and at the time of recording, the first 3 episodes of season 2 a little as well, and going in depth on a few of them here and there, most notably Witches Before Wizards, Convention, Enchanting Gromfright, and Wing It Like Witches. So if you don't know what the Owl House is, it's basically what you'd get if you mixed Harry Potter with Undertale and turned it into a Disney cartoon show. And a good number of people have said it has a very similar vibe to Gravity Falls, but I haven't actually watched much Gravity Falls. Which is ironic, considering Alex Hirsch has watched some of my stuff. I was going to show the tweet, but I can't actually find it. You'll just have to take my word for it. But if you like Gravity Falls, which basically everybody who has watched it does, you'll probably like the Owl House. So a bit of background. Luce, a human, stumbles into the magical world of the Boiling Isles, and a bunch of stuff happens. Again, I'm assuming a lot of you have watched the show. I'm not going to recap everything. So Luce is amazing and adorable, and no, I'm not going to play that one clip from the first episode that everybody apparently relates to. I'm going to play these ones instead.
I found something magical. I'm going to put my face in it. Confetti! Do you need me to stay home and take care of you? I could put King in a little doctor's outfit.
Meh? No one wants to see that.
I do.
A lot of people have found Luce to be very relatable, but strangely enough, I actually think I relate a bit more to Ida than to Luce. Is that weird? It's probably a bit weird. So I went into the Owl House almost completely blind. I basically only knew one thing about it, and I have a whole section of this video dedicated to that. But for the most part, I didn't know what to expect. And despite that, it still wasn't what I expected. And I mean, that's part of the process with starting off a new show. It does take a few episodes before you get a decent grasp on exactly what the show is trying to do. Even with no expectations, you still kind of view it thinking about what you think it should be doing rather than appreciating it for what it is actually doing. I remember it took a while before I got into Buffy. In the 4th episode of that, there's this giant praying mantis thing, and I just kind of took a step back and thought, like, what am I watching right now? What is this show exactly, and why does everyone love it so much? It wasn't really until the end of season 1, and especially the end of season 2, before I really understood what Buffy was, and it made going back to those earlier episodes a lot more enjoyable than when I saw them for the first time. Also, a quick question, just because, like, when am I next going to be talking about Buffy? Why does Giles call her Tara when everyone else calls her Tara? Is that like a British thing? Because I've noticed other Brits calling her Tara as well, but I'm British, and I've always said Tara. I don't get that. And funnily enough, relating that back to the Owl House, I've heard a few people mispronounce loose as lose, and like, I know it's got a Z in it, but it's loose. It's literally as easy as just listening to how characters in the show say it.
Now, back to what I was saying.
It really didn't take long before I was fully invested in the Owl House. Looking back now, the pilot is a bit weak, with its whole message of, like, being a weirdo is a good thing, and then introducing us to Luce, a character who we're kind of just told is a weird kid. They show a few examples of her weirdness, albeit more of her just traumatizing other students at her school, and then the rest of the episode is her doing generally rational things, considering she's just stumbled into this magical fantasy world, while at the same time the show is hammering at home that she's a weirdo, and these other characters are weirdos too, and be weird.
Weirdos.
Weirdness.
Yeah, Luce is weird, but she's not excessively weird, and I certainly wouldn't say it's her defining character trait. I mean, even when looking at her design, it certainly doesn't scream weird. In fact, it's pretty basic and normal looking. And in that sense, she feels more like a realistic depiction of a quote-unquote weirdo. The best way I can describe it is, and I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but she's less of a quirky character and more of a quirky person. You know what I mean? Like, no? Okay. But you don't judge a book by its cover, and you certainly don't judge a show by its pilot. Cough, cough, Alpha J show, cough, cough. The show pretty much immediately ditches the whole message it was going for in episode 1. And aside from episode 8, which is just a really uninspired body swap episode, and episode 10, which, apart from interesting world building, is just a bit bland. Basically, the entire rest of the show is way better, especially the last few episodes of season 1. They are just pure gold. So doing an almost complete 180 immediately, episode 2 is the one that really gets across what the underlying theme of this series is, and cements Luce's character arc across the show. The episode is about Luce wondering why she stumbled into this world, and she is sure that she must have some predetermined path of destiny. She meets this wizard who assigns her a magical quest to retrieve the celestial staff and free the Isles from an ancient evil. Both Ida and King laugh at the whole idea, and Ida says that there is no celestial staff and the wizard is just making all of this up. Until Luce discovers a secret message in the map she was given, saying that the path will only appear to the worthy, the chosen one. So Luce sets out on the quest, encounters some friendly helpers along the way, and is able to retrieve the celestial staff, proving that she is the chosen one. The prophecy was true, and she was destined to come to the Boiling Isles and save everyone. And then it turns out that Ida was right. It was fake. All of it was fake. It was all set up by this octopus dude. He manipulated Luce purely because he's a business rival of Ida's and wanted to lure her into a trap. It was all for some petty, selfish reason, and Luce realizes that there's no predetermined path of destiny. She literally just ended up here for no other reason than a tiny owl stole her book and she followed it. That's it. That's all it was. A complete accident. Luce is obviously a bit upset and confused by all of this, and then this scene happens.
Look, kid, everyone wants to believe they're chosen. But if we all waited around for a prophecy to make us special, we'd die waiting. And that's why you need to choose yourself.
And for the most part, that's kind of what this show is about. This whole magical realm isn't full of wonder and joy at every turn. It's nothing like Luce's fantasy books because that's all they are, a fantasy. The real world is sometimes a pretty scary place. There's bad stuff. There's selfish people. There's actual danger. And the beautiful irony of Luce's arc across the show is how she starts off living in a fantasy world, and it takes her literally living in a fantasy world to ground her in reality. And that's so poetically backwards, it's amazing. But the show certainly isn't just about beating you over the head with a healthy dose of reality. It makes sure to show a lot of the good aspects too, like friends and family and the wonders of nature and things like that. Another episode that demonstrates this well is episode 17, Wing It Like Witches. The episode starts off with the character Boscha constantly tormenting and bullying Willow, and by extension Luce and Gus as well. And after kind of misinterpreting Amity's advice on dealing with her, Luce challenges her to a game of Grudgebee on Willow's behalf. Grudgebee is a popular sport on the Boiling Isles, of which Boscha is the team captain of, and Willow has never played. So Luce goes into this with the mentality of, because they're the underdogs, they're gonna win, because that's how it works in movies. And after pushing Willow and Gus too far in their training, she again has to be brought back down to reality.
Not everything can be solved with a good attitude and a dope music soundtrack. We're going to lose, and no movie can help us against that.
So after learning her lesson, Luce forfeits the game and offers to take Willow's punishments on her behalf. And then after Willow steps back in to defend her, Willow, Luce and Amity all take on Boscha and her team in an actual Grudgebee game. And they lose, albeit because of an arbitrary rule / not so subtle Quidditch. Albeit because of an arbitrary rule / not so subtle dig at Quidditch, but they still lose, and Amity ends up injuring her leg in the game too. But despite all that, the episode still ends on a positive note, with the other members of Boscha's team congratulating Willow on a good game and saying how much fun they had, and it ends with a nice montage of them all having fun and enjoying themselves, and it's all so nice. I just find it really clever the way that Luce's character motives are often challenged by the world around her. She always has good intentions and she always wants to help somebody or right some wrong, but the way she approaches dealing with those problems are often unrealistic and don't usually work. Similar to what I was saying earlier, she has these expectations of how the world should work rather than realizing and appreciating how they do work. That was a connection I literally just made up while writing this script. That was not planned at all. And there are countless examples of this throughout the series. Like in episode 5, Convention, Amity makes Luce doubt whether she can ever really be a witch, so Luce challenges her to a duel, despite the fact that at this point in the show, Luce literally only knows one spell, and it's not one that can really help in combat in any way. So she really has absolutely no chance of winning whatsoever. Ida decides to help her cheat by placing traps around the arena, but it's quickly discovered that they cheated and they automatically lose the duel. Until Ida realizes that her sister Lilith also cheated by stealing a power glyph from another coven and placing it on Amity without her knowing to make her magic stronger. So in the end, nobody wins, and Luce and Amity end the episode bonding over how they were used as pawns in Ida and Lilith's rivalry. And then Luce and Ida have this interaction.
Do you think I'll ever be a true witch?
What? I don't know. Who's a true witch? These suckers? According to them, that means being in a coven, but I never joined one and I'm better than all of them combined. You gotta be your own witch.
And I really like how this shows the dynamic between Luce and Ida. They're both somewhat similar characters, both often having a positive outlook on things, but Ida is a lot more realistic, and realizes that things don't always go the way you hoped, but it doesn't mean it's not worth it. And that's the perfect foil for Luce's more naive, everything's a story with a happy ending kind of vibe. And I like that she doesn't give some heartfelt speech about how if you try hard enough you can accomplish anything, you can do anything. No, she literally just goes, I don't know, who cares? Does it really matter? You can be whatever you want to do. And that's what actually gets through to Luce and cheers her up. And I think that's just a great message for a show like this to tackle. So, what else do I want to talk about? I suppose I could talk about the other characters. First, let's talk about King, Gus, and Hooty, and then I'll move on to Lilith, Willow, and Amity. King, Gus, and Hooty probably have the least amount of character growth throughout the series out of the main 8 noteworthy characters, and I'm just now realizing that they're the only male characters out of that 8. I'm pretty sure that's a complete coincidence, but whatever. King and Gus both have notable episodes where they make mistakes, do something wrong, and then learn a lesson by the end of the episode, but for the most part they're the same characters now as they were from the beginning.
No offense, Gus.
No, not at all. I know what I'm about.
That being said, I mean, the series is still going on and there's plenty of room for change, especially given what we've seen in Season 2 so far in terms of learning more about King and his backstory. I can definitely see his character developing going forward. Hooty has absolutely no growth across the series, but I mean, let's be fair, that's because you can't improve on perfection. I will say I'm all for him and Lilith becoming best friends in Season 2, considering most of his appearances in Season 1 involved the other characters ignoring and or being irritated by him. So I'm totally down for Lilith and Hooty to have a closer relationship this season. And speaking of Lilith, Lilith has been a real roller coaster across the show so far. Like, at first she's intriguing, and then you kind of grow to like her, and then at the end of Season 1 everyone absolutely despised her, and now it's like, I kind of like her again now. I mean, coming off of what happened in the Season 1 finale, which I won't spoil here, I'm very much looking forward to how her character is going to develop across this season, especially with us seemingly going to learn more about the rest of the Clawthorn about the rest of the Clawthorn family. Jeez, that was a tongue twister. Willow is another character that's grown across Season 1, although, I'll be honest, it does feel a bit more telly, less showy. She kind of just says she's more confident, and there are a few scenes here and there of other students being a lot kinder and more appreciative of her as the series progresses. She's a good character, and she is often the voice of reason amongst the group. She's just not all that interesting sometimes, but a necessary part of the team. And then finally, let's talk about Amity. Amity is a lot of people's favourite character in the show, and she is by far the one with the most noticeable and significant change across the series. Amity's progression was something that I wasn't expecting, or at least wasn't expecting to be done this efficiently, and efficient is probably the best way I can describe it because it's fast, it's very fast, but it's not rushed. Every episode Amity is in further develops her character in some way. She goes from being a very typical mean girl character, and you think she's just going to be that for the rest of the season, but they very quickly switch up the gears and establish why she is the way that she is. How she's tormented by her older siblings and the pressure she faces from her parents to excel in school and uphold the family name. How she and Willow used to be best friends, and her parents basically forced her to cut ties with her because her magical ability was lacking compared to Amity's, and how they kind of just made her associate with other high-achieving students like Boscha, who she doesn't even really like. Boscha basically represents what Amity used to be and who she would still be if it weren't for Luce, Gus, and Willow purposely trying to befriend her and get to know her and understand her. And she eventually lets her guard down and lets them into her life. I think Amity will probably go down in history as basically a masterclass of how to redeem a bully character. So I'm just going to very briefly talk about the lore and how it's super intriguing. Like seriously, this show does a fantastic job in terms of world building, and it's really fun getting into like the intricate history of the Boiling Isles and stuff like that. They do a really good job of setting up how everything works, how exactly witches are able to cast magical spells, and how Luce has to figure out a completely different method of doing them because she's human. It almost feels like a video game in how she like gradually discovers these new spells in different ways as the series goes on. And based on the first few episodes of Season 2, it seems as though the 4 glyphs she's learnt so far, light, ice, plant, and fire, are probably the only ones there are, but that you can combine them in many different ways. So I'm interested in knowing how that's going to play out this season. I also really like how the Coven system is set up and how you gradually build a picture of it across the series. At no point does it really feel like the show is unloading a bunch of exposition on you all at once. You learn that witches have to join a specific coven, and when they do, all their other magic is sealed away, that it's illegal to not join a coven, and that the whole system was set up by Emperor Belos, and you eventually piece together that he only did it so that no one could be as powerful as him. He's still a bit of a mystery at this point in the show. Aside from the Coven system he set up, we also know that he wants the portal to the human world that Luce came through, and he's piecing a new one together from the remains of the old one. But we don't know why, other than that he said it's not for any kind of invasion or anything. So I'm very interested to know what's going to happen with that, and what exactly the so-called Day of Unity is. It's all just very, very interesting world building and mysteries yet to be revealed. Oh, okay, that wasn't that brief, I suppose. So just to quickly go over a couple other minor things I like. Obviously the humor in the show is really good, and I could spend ages showing clips of funny moments and stuff, but I wouldn't be able to pick. And I mean, you can find plenty of compilations and stuff. It's a very funny show. I do want to mention some of my favorite lines. Not necessarily the funniest ones, but just the ones that stuck with me as just being well written.
I thought we were as cool as cucumbers, but we're as sour as pickles.
I am your mother. You will obey me and die.
Sadly, this is one problem crime can't solve.
Capitalism, where everyone wins, except you.
This is crazy. If I die here, my mom's gonna kill me.
I'm obligated to remind you that I only use our bets to utterly humiliate you. And that you've never won.
I like those odds.
I also want to commend how genuinely horrific some of the imagery is in this show sometimes. Like, it's kind of surprising just how close it gets sometimes to just being like straight up horror while still being a kid's show. And this is something I haven't heard anybody else bring up, but I wanted to mention it, as minor of a detail as it might be. I really appreciate the continuity from episode to episode. I mean, it seems like something that should be a given with a show like this, one that, despite having self-contained stories, is sequential and has a developing story across the season. But it's just little things like characters referencing back to things that happened in previous episodes. Like how in episode 13, Principal Bump explains how the detention track is here because the real detention is still under repairs from when Luce and Gus destroyed it in episode 9. Or how the character Bartholomew finds one of the band posters of Luce that Gus accidentally left behind when trying to hide them all, and he uses that to his advantage in getting Luce caught. And those posters are the exact same ones put up in episode 3, with Luce still covered in the purple abomination goop. And in episode 6, Luce shows Ida a photo on her phone of what Ida looks like when she turns into the Owl Beast, and you realize that episode 4 actually showed her accidentally taking that photo, which is what let them know that the Owl Beast was sensitive to bright lights, and the phone even still has a cracked screen from her dropping it. Again, it might seem like something you just take for granted, but it's just little things like that I really like, and it makes you appreciate it much more when watching each episode in order, one by one. And just for one last minor thing I wanted to bring up, apparently Aaron Hansen from Game Grumps voices a few background characters, which I genuinely didn't notice, because it doesn't really sound much like him, but I just wanted to bring that up anyway, because it's just a fun bit of trivia.
Wow, what a night. Now, can someone let me down? Anyone?
And now, for this last section of this video, I want to talk about the one thing that I did know about the Owl House going into it, because it was kind of difficult not to hear about it, and that's the whole Lumity thing. Now, if you don't know what Lumity is, it's basically the ship name for the characters Luce and Amity. Now, I've never been very big on shipping.
Don't you dare insult shipping in my presence!
I don't mind people doing it, but I've never dabbled in it myself, unironically at least. And I usually hate the ship names people come up with their often Jedward levels of creativity. That being said, Lumity is a ship that I am very much on board with. Get it on board? 'Cause it's a ship? Editor, play that clip of Chick laughing.
This is no laughing matter.
I wasn't watching the show when the first season was airing. I only got into it within the past couple months. But I imagine when Lumity first came about, that's all it was. It was a ship. A little harmless thing within the show's fandom. It makes sense, to have these two characters who start off as rivals, grow to tolerate each other, eventually become friends. I mean, the next logical step would be for them to develop romantic feelings for each other. And I guess most people shipping the two of them kind of knew that it would never actually become canon. Definitely not. Two female characters developing a romantic relationship in not just a children's show, but a Disney show. Obviously, they could never actually do that. And then they just fucking did it. And not even in a remotely subtle way. Not in, a queer-baiting, we can cut this section out for intolerant countries, or it can be interpreted as something different kind of way, as much as people have certainly tried. Up until episode 16, there were very, very subtle indicators that Amity was developing feelings for Luce, but it didn't amount to much more than just a few moments of her blushing when around her. And despite it being an entirely one-sided crush for the first season, and only now in season 2 does it seem like Luce is crushing back, there was plenty of indicators that Luce was attracted to girls too. I mean, there's the fact that Luce was specifically written to be bisexual by Dana Terrace, who is herself bi.
I don't get you. Pick a side.
Sorry, that line was completely taken out of context. I just thought it'd be funny to put that there right when I'm talking about this. But despite that, not everyone takes the creator's word as gospel. The whole, death of the author concept thing, and we all remember that infamous, by the way, Dumbledore is gay debacle from a few years ago. But I mean, this is not really the same thing. I mean, like I said, she was written as bi from the start, and the show is still going. There's also little bits of evidence in the first season, like Luce blushing at both Edric and Emera individually after them winking at her, and her saying this line,
I've got a new crush, and her name is Education.
And of course, some people don't deem that valid because there are any number of reasons why a character might blush. And the word education is female in Spanish, and Luce is Hispanic. Now, being generous, I could understand not taking the creator's word as gospel with no in-universe evidence. Likewise, I could understand different interpretations of supposed evidence with no confirmation from the creator of the show. But when you literally have both, kinda just seems like you're projecting and you just want the character to be straight. Plus, I mean, more than most other sexualities, when it comes to being bi, it's kinda hard to disprove unless it's explicitly stated otherwise by the character themselves. When it comes to Amity, however, I mean, you really couldn't interpret her as anything other than just being super gay for Luce. And it all comes to a head in episode 16, Enchanting Gromfright. Arguably the best episode of the season, and not just because of the last few minutes. The entire episode is pretty great. So, we learn about Grom, and how it can morph into your worst fear, and that Amity has been chosen to fight it. And she's understandably very worried about everyone seeing what her greatest fear is. So, Luce steps in to take her place, defeat Grom, and be her fearless champion. And in typical Owl House fashion, it doesn't pan out the way she expected it to. So Amity jumps back in to protect her, and Grom morphs into some shadowy figure, takes Amity's note that she'd been holding on to since the start of the episode, and tears it in half. Amity picks up one half, and Luce runs over and picks up the other. And it's revealed that Amity's fear was being rejected by the person she was planning to ask out. And keep in mind, at this point, we don't actually know for sure who that person is. But I mean, I think most people have pretty much figured out that it was Luce, because it had to be, surely. Anyway, Luce offers to go with her instead. Well, I mean, not actually instead. In her mind instead. And they both do this amazingly animated dance sequence to fight Grom. And this level of fluid animation is usually only reserved for like the big fight scenes and stuff like that. But they made sure to put their all into this dance because they knew how big of a deal this was. But then, just in case it wasn't obvious enough, they go and do this straight after.
So, who did you want to ask out? Oh, it's not important.
And that right there is what basically pushes it over the edge. That is literally Lumity confirmed. Like I said, I heard about this when it happened last August because it kind of completely took over Twitter, but I only started watching the show a couple months ago. I can't imagine what it must have felt like to watch this when it first aired. And they don't even stop there. I think some people might have expected it to just like be this one episode. Like I know Dana and the team had to fight hard to even get this, and I wouldn't have been surprised if Disney compromised and said, okay, you can go all out for this one episode, but that's it. But no, the very next episode, Wing It Like Witches, has kind of become infamously known as the Gay Panic episode. It's basically all she does for the entire thing, and it's amazing.
She can be so stupid, which I love. I mean, hate! In any case, she needs you right now, which is sweet. I mean, I hate it, and it's dumb!
Are you queer? Probably.
So that's basically all I wanted to say in terms of that. I am eagerly awaiting another episode with Luce and Amity, and it seems like we're getting another one this weekend. And for one last point on this, I do like how completely normalized it is within the context of the show. I mean, it is a children's show. It's not like they could really go down the route of like homophobia and bigotry, at least not in an explicit way. But I think it's important to have more shows that not only have queer representation, but have it treated as just a normal everyday thing. You know, because it is. I mean, sure, I understand the mindset of showing homophobia as a way for the audience to sympathize with the queer characters and villainize the people with these bigoted mentalities. But, you know, positive reinforcement works too. Like, you can just show queer people being queer and treat it the same way as you treat straight characters, and maybe people will change their attitudes on their own? And it's especially important to normalize it in children's media, because children will literally believe anything they're told. And it is much harder to unlearn something as an adult, especially if all you're hearing is people just telling you you're wrong. I mean, that's just going to make you double down. And on top of that, everyone knows that queer people will literally watch anything that has other queer people in it. And while I, thankfully, can't speak from personal experience, I'd imagine that people who have experienced some form of homophobia, transphobia, etc., probably don't want to have to relive that just for the sake of getting some decent representation. Anyway, sorry, went off on a bit of a tangent there. Let's try and bring it back to the Owl House. The Owl House really is a sum of all of its parts. It might look on the surface like just a cartoon about witches and demons and magic, and it is that, but it's so much more than that, and it's so much more than what I've described in this video. I just love the show so much. I really, really love it. It's a really good show, and you should definitely watch it if you're not already. Season 2 is currently airing right now. At the time of recording, we're 3 episodes in, and assuming this video goes out on time, episode 4 will have just released a couple days ago. So, you know, please watch it. Obviously, you need to watch the entirety of Season 1 to get caught up. You could maybe skip episode 8 if you want. It's not really important to the overall plot. And I hope you're not bothered by me having spoiled a bit of the first season. But I mean, well, that's kind of on you now. But I am completely hooked on this show, and I can't wait to see what the rest of Season 2 has to offer. So far, it's been really good. No rocky start or duds or anything. It's gotten right back into it, and I am super invested. If you want to watch some better, more consistent videos about the Owl House, I'd recommend this creatively edited video by Lines in Motion, this super long, in-depth one by Film Freak, and basically anything by It's Rebecca Rose. Links to those in the description or at the end if you're interested. So, yeah, the Owl House. I don't really know how to end this. Oh yeah, I was going to show a preview of the Meatballs YTP. Okay, thanks for listening, and goodbye.
This piano, those pianos, that ghetto piano, that spaghetti, that Venus de Milo with that penis next to a Michelangelo's David that also has a penis.
And it was all shallow.
So, Jello.
Ah.
It's a sauce. I mean, sis.
Why do you do that?
Whoa.
Easy.